The future holds many wonders, but also man-made horrors beyond our comprehension. The movie In Time shows us one, which looks like a miracle, the ability to live forever if you have enough time on your clock. But what it hides is a corrupt system. If you're in debt or can't pay your bills, you no longer just lose your car or your house, you literally lose your life. So keep your eyes on your time, and let's see if we can earn a few more minutes. So the year is 2169, and humanity has embraced a new system which rules their lives, every single second of it, and it's pretty amazing whilst terrifying at the same time. So all humans only biologically age up to 25 years old, and once they reach this age their bodies stay 25 physically forever, and every single one of us has the ability to live forever. Immortality is possible if you have the time, thanks to the so-called clock which is located on your inner forearm, which shows you how much time you have until, well, you run out. And once this hits zero, this leads to death. This clock kicks in once you turn exactly 25 years old, and everyone gets 1 year of time once it begins. Though if you're in debt, this is immediately deducted, which brings up the chance of instant death at 25, which is very brutal. Now the time on your arm constantly counts down, and every second it ticks lower. And this is not only your remaining time of life, but also the new currency, and it's used to purchase everything. So not only can you spend it, but you can also accumulate it legally or illegally. And this new system has led to many perks for the few and huge problems for the many. The first major impact is the economy is now truly tied to how long you'll live. Like in our world, even poorer people can make it to old age. I know poor people in their 90s, and richer people who died in their 40s. But in the world of In Time, this is ripped up. If you're poor and you don't earn, you're going to drop dead. And if you're rich, you can live for hundreds of years potentially. And rapid changes in the economy can lead to thousands dying. Something simple like energy or water costs rising might put huge numbers of people in debt. Even though In Time gives you the ability to live potentially forever, you still need to drink, eat and sleep to function. So fluctuations of basic necessities will wipe out large swathes of the poorest. And anyone who is in financial trouble, this might just be enough to push them over what they can afford, and their clocks would finally tick down. We even see in the movie that a cup of coffee has gone from 3 minutes to 4 in 1 day, and a 25% increase, which shocks people at the shop. An increase of 1 hour to 2 on a bus fare also leads to the main character, played by Justin Timberlake, losing his mother. She cannot afford the bus journey home, and she has to try and sprint home. And obviously as she's running to him to get some time, she fails by mere seconds. It shows the absolute brutality of the new economy. It really punishes the poor, and over time with prices rising and the rich getting richer, which leads to them living longer, so more poor people must die to make sure there's enough space, because if everyone lives forever, this will put a major strain on resources such as food, water and space. And over the centuries, or maybe millennium, this system will lead to the average age dropping from around 74 in my nation, maybe down to 25 to 30, because as soon as your clock kicks in, well, it's going to be a struggle to survive in this new savage economy. And obviously, as there's more rich people, they're going to need more poor people to work, but at the same time, they may only want them to work for a few years, and once they pass on, well, there'll be fresh bodies to fill those gaps. This harsh economy is further reinforced with time zones that are separate areas that require time to enter. It enforces a class system, with it costing time to move between these zones, ranging from a day up to a year, and this obviously would go up with the time inflation. And even if you were poor and saved up, your time would be significantly reduced as soon as you cross to a new area. And if you add the increased time cost of a richer time zone, it makes it nearly impossible to have any economic and social mobility. In a sense, it makes a permanent class system where the lowest cannot move up, and if they do, it's very rare and extremely difficult. And you literally must risk your life to try, because one miscalculation on the time costs, and your last second may tick down. And this new class system would also bring a certain attitude to how people treat each other. And if you ever, let's say, go from the poorest area to the richest, you would always be known as a person from the poor area. You might have all that wealth, but you aren't truly of the higher class, as these systems tend to go very deep. If you're not born into a certain class, then you never truly belong. And I would imagine only moving maybe 1 or 2 time zones up would be seen as acceptable in these social circles. The time zones are also monitored by timekeepers who are the law enforcement of the world. They fight crime but seem more occupied in making sure the time streams are maintained, as they can see the amount of time in each zone. And I imagine they can see how much is being spent, earned and stored in banks and other institutions, though they can't track private storage on the mobile time capsules. So people could hide some time away, but nothing too consequential, to upset the balance. And any major shift in time or people entering other time zones in significant numbers would result in the timekeepers being deployed to get things back in order, as they seem to be very closely supported by the wealthy of the system, and rampant corruption is hinted at in the movie, with Cillian Murphy's character, and it is Cillian Murphy, not Cillian, check it out, that's how you pronounce it, just before anyone kicks off. And his character is obviously very unique as he doesn't accept a bribe and he sticks to the letter of the law, and he himself comes from the poorest time zone and he got out. It's a nice part of the film and his character is definitely one of the best in my opinion. Now the timekeepers bring up an interesting issue with the fact that crime is pretty low, as there's no jails or prisons. When you commit a crime you're left with 2 hours for booking and then you die. So anything that is a crime that results in an arrest pretty much guarantees a death sentence. So petty crime seems almost extinct, but some more serious organised crimes and crimes of passion like murder would persist. And we see the so-called Minutemen, who are gangsters who make their money doing various things, one being taking time off people who have significant stores of it, and the other would be like giving out loans to people with very high interest, so they can obviously keep them in their debt. And the timekeepers seem to allow these organised crime elements to go about their business, as it seems those on top don't mind, as long as this pressure is on the poorest people, and if they're fighting amongst themselves, they won't be fighting those on top. Also worth noting that certain crimes like vandalism, graffiti, and other petty things literally aren't worth your time. People, especially the poorest ones, have to cherish each second they have. It's not worth wasting your time, your minutes, your hours on things like graffiti. And obviously, higher crimes would probably result in a shootout with timekeepers. Like if you commit a murder, you know that you are done if you get caught. So you would see more. Basically, you'd see no middle ground in crimes. It'd either be all or nothing, which is pretty interesting. Another reason crime is probably lower is because is it worth dying for? As even though you can die from time running out and lack of food or water, if you have enough time, old age isn't a threat, nor is illness or disease. These have been eliminated. So for anyone with substantial amounts of time, many things aren't worth the risk. Think if you have even just a few decades in the kind of savings on your clock or, in private storage, you're basically in perfect health with your biological body at 25. You can enjoy life a hell of a lot. And it discourages doing risky and potentially harmful things. And the fact that when someone dies, their time is locked, as it cannot be taken from someone once they're dead, it means things like robbery is quite risky, because unless someone's going to give it over to you, even at the risk of their life, the thing is, if you're stealing time from someone, let's say you have 100 years and I'm going to take it, you're going to die, so they're going to fight back. And if you kill them, it locks the time. And even if you do steal the time, well, if it's on your arm, it can be seen. Unless you put it into private storage, it's quite easy to track it. It makes kind of stealing it a bit more difficult. And obviously, if you move through time zones or you start to spend it, the timekeepers can see where more years appear. All of a sudden, if 100 years appear in a poor area, they're going to notice that. So it makes for a very confusing situation on many fronts, but also very risky for the criminals. We also have to see something very odd again, where timekeepers and bodyguards, whose job is to put their lives on their line, are actually very reluctant to do so, because they can potentially live forever as well, and they don't want to die. So they might actually not do as much as a daring criminal or person who's willing to do very risky things. And they might know that, wait a minute, if I jump out this window, those timekeepers probably won't do it. They're scared of injuring themselves, like breaking a leg, or they're scared of actually dying from the fall. So if you're a very daring criminal from a poor background, like we see in the movie with Will, he can potentially get away with a lot until someone's brave enough to stand up to him, and we only see that in a very few cases. And actually, for the richer people, it might be better to elevate poorer people from, like the worst areas as your guards, build some loyalty with them. Find someone who's, a very poor family and say, look, I'm going to make sure your family lives forever and with relative comfort, but you become my bodyguard, and it's your job to make sure I stay alive. And if you do so, your mother, your sister, your brother, they're going to live a good life. That's actually kind of an interesting idea to it. Basically, elevate the poor for loyalty. So now, it's a very weird bit of it, but it really got me thinking. Time theft is probably the only crime that's fairly common, and it happens more in the poor areas, and it's not simply running up and stealing it like, oi, give me your time. A lot of the time it happens via these time fights where people lock arms and fight to drain the other person's clock, and the loser loses all their time in most cases and dies. Now this is never truly explained how it works, but I imagine it's a mix of physical strength and a bit of mental strength and skill on top of that. And obviously you kind of use like psychological and physical strength to overpower your enemy and then drain their clock. And technically it's not a crime as both voluntarily join the fight, but it seems to only happen in the poorer areas. It's a weird one, but yeah, this is the only really thing you see that is common in the film that happens. Obviously, you've seen the Minutemen go up to people and drain their clocks with a gun in their face, but that also doesn't make too much sense, because if they're draining your clock, it's not like stealing your wallet. Imagine I come up to you and say, give me your wallet. Okay, you've lost some money, but you're alive. If I come up to you and say, I'm going to drain the clock, you're going to die anyway. So a lot of people are going to be willing to fight back. So the movie doesn't really explain it that well, but it actually makes crime very risky, because your money is your life in this. So unless a Minuteman comes up to you and says, look, you've got 6 months on your clock, give me a month, I'll let you live. Okay, but most of the time they're going to drain the entire clock. So yeah, basically being a criminal is quite risky, which is good. It's good that being a criminal is risky, so the average person's more willing to fight back and stand up for themselves, which I like. People's work also must have changed significantly, as now when you go to work for, let's say, an 8-hour shift, well, your clock is ticking down while this happens, and until you're paid, it isn't going back up. And most jobs seem to pay day to days, especially in poorer areas. Most only have a day or two on their clocks. They can't afford to wait for weekly or monthly payments. And this raises the question about people training for jobs and becoming like a skilled tradesman, for instance. So if you're a plumber or electrician, it takes years to master this. So is it worth the time spent for the payoff? Because if you train for a job and it isn't paying well in time, well, it literally might lead to your death in the long run. And jobs that are more passion over pay, for instance, like people who want to become an actor or an artist, very few actually succeed to make this a paying career. So it makes going for these jobs basically impossible for the poorest people, and only available to the wealthiest who kind of are willing to take that risk because they can afford to. Also, things like days off seem to be non-existent because most jobs are paid on a quota, so now pretty much every job is going to pay only when you work a shift. There'll be no days off, no holidays, no sick pay. It's basically crony capitalism on steroids. It's pretty damn brutal. Jobs would also be far stricter in the required standards and quotas, and people would probably take work far more seriously, as if you lose your job and your ability to make money, well, it could cost you your life, because obviously in the real world, you lose a job, okay, I'll find one next week or next month. Well, in this world, you might only have a few days on your clock. You don't have time to find another job, potentially. And a business cutting staff or going bankrupt and closing would be a potentially life-changing event or life-ending event for many. In a sense, the economy has more impact than ever. Think if you wanted to right now, you could go get some supplies, go out in a tent and go live off the grid for months. You know, you might not be earning any money, but you could go and do it. You could just go and be homeless, do whatever you want. In the world of in time, unless you have months on your clock, you can't just go somewhere randomly. You're stuck in the cycle of going to work or doing something to earn that time to live another day. And something like setting up a business or investing is also extremely risky. It's not just money, it's literally your time, it's your life. And I think the entire economy is massively propped up. It is crony capitalism. It's the worst kind of end state of capitalism. And trust me, I'm no socialist, I'm no communist either, but this is literally when something goes too far, and in time kind of paints this beautifully. It's basically, this is what happens when money becomes more important than your life. This is what it kind of shows to me, and it's pretty cool in the film. It's not the best film, but I definitely say give it a watch. It definitely brings up some cool ideas. The psychological effects of having a clock on your arm telling you how long you have left to live is massive. For the poorer people who regularly only have hours left on their clocks, it would be a constant source of stress and anxiety. As even though your body stays 25, your mind can still break, and mental health linked with the short amount of time they have would be rampant. But the rich wouldn't dodge mental illness either. Yes, the wealthy have more time, sometimes enough time to live basically forever. They don't need to worry about running out in most cases. But they're not without issues, like basically they have no risk in their life. This would lead to boredom and a feeling of melancholy over time. For those who live for hundreds of years, eventually the mind gets too old for the body. Many might disagree, but eventually people do get tired of life. You see this with older people. They get into their 80s and 90s and they say, look, I've had a good life, I'm ready to go. This is basically against human nature. We do have a limit on how much our mind can take, and eventually people are ready to die. It's just a fact. In the movie, attempts are made to share large amounts of time, this being a direct threat to the established system and those powerful who benefit from it. Realistically, anyone trying to upset the balance would be killed. It wouldn't be like the movie where, they just run around, there's a few timekeepers. You're talking like a heavy military response. They'd pull out all the stops, they would get killed. It would take an actual push from a counter-elite force with significant resources combined with support from the common man and woman. Only then could they challenge the status quo. But a line from the movie really resonates with me. For a few to be immortal, many must die. This is not only true, but highlights a key problem with the biological stop at 25 and people being able to live forever. If they have enough time, that is. We have a situation that if everyone lived to, let's say, 100 years old, the population would bloom to unattainable levels as attrition to disease and illness is gone, and only starvation, dehydration, and accidents or murder, they're the only ways to kill someone before their clock actually runs out of time. And obviously, means we're stuck in this kind of status quo. Like, if you upset the balance, basically you've got a catastrophic events potentially happening. And the only way for humanity to actually get out of this cycle would be to try to stop the time clocks and the biological engineering stop at 25, to go back to our natural state of living. But I don't even know if that's possible. Once science hits this level, who's going to choose to go back to the natural state? It would be the minority of people, and I just don't think it'll happen. I think they're basically stuck in this system until something cataclysmic happens and basically makes them change, or they have to evolve further into the system, which is pretty worrying. Another strange issue that arises from the age locking at 25 years old in terms of appearance and biology is that there's no old people in any sense. It's hard to determine who's been alive for 25 years and who is over 100 years old. And as they say 25 for the 25th time, or 25 for the 75th time, which would be 100 years old, which is kind of cool. And it's going to mess with how society treats people and how we treat each other, for better or for worse. There's a few scenes that highlight this. First, when Philip Wes is introducing Will to his wife, daughter, and mother-in-law, and he says, "Will Salas, allow me to introduce my mother-in-law, Clara, my wife, Michelle, and my daughter, Sylvia. And I believe you two have already met." It's very necessary for him to point out each one, as if he doesn't actually know who they are, you can't tell by age who's the mother, who's the daughter, who's the grandmother. You just don't know, which is kind of cool but creepy at the same time. And we also see where Cillian Murphy's character is offered services by a prostitute, and he remarks, "You must be hitting 60 now," and she says, "Thanks for letting everybody know." She may look young, but she's old, and she's seen a hell of a lot of mileage. She is definitely for the streets. And even though the movie is set in the future, there seems to be no technological progress except for the technological advancements that keep the system propped up. Yes, we see amazing biological engineering with a time clock system and the elimination of disease and aging, but other advancements seem to have completely stagnated, as if humanity is set to live forever and any technological progression is seen as a threat to those in power. And if humanity chooses to stay on this path, well, they will stay with this system until this system fails, like all systems eventually do. There will be too many wealthy people over time, and too many poor people will be dying too young. It will cause chaos, and the job market will eventually collapse, and so will the economy. And it will show all the corruption and unfairness in the system, and eventually civil disobedience and outright revolt will happen. Basically, the people on the bottom will realise that their lives are just like, they're basically like a cattle class, and they're dying too young, there's no future for them, so they're not going to take it. And the system is surprisingly fragile. Realistically, those on the bottom actually have a lot of power. Yes, they could strike and die, but imagine all the poorer people in the in-time world go on strike, and the rich people go, well, they're just going to die. Okay. But if they die with a lack of technological progress, automation can't take over their jobs in the labour pool. So we have a catch-22 where the rich need the poor to keep working, but if they don't keep the poor just hopeful enough of a better future, it's all going to collapse. It's a bit like the Hunger Games, where you need to keep them in line but give them a little bit of hope. And if you allow that to go too far in either way, the entire system collapses. So yeah, it's a very interesting one in time. It's as fragile as a house of cards, but it's only fragile if people really see the weaknesses in it, and people are too busy watching the clocks on their arms to actually look at the world around them, which is a kind of interesting tone to the movie, which I really like. And obviously, as we mentioned earlier, time is not only stored on people's arms, but in these kind of solid brick-shaped time storage devices, and these can be used as basically kind of wallets or safes to store the time, and obviously they're not just left lying around. Poorer people would probably hide them in the house, but for the wealthy, these are used to store the assets of businesses, banks, and even the governments that exist. And these are extremely well protected. They'll be in vaults, they'll be basically guarded like fortresses. We actually see near the end of the movie where Will and Sylvia is approaching this massive, looks like a very posh kind of bank-looking building. And obviously they're walking up the stairs with a couple of pistols, and it's like, come on guys, you're going to get absolutely wasted. These places would be guarded like Fort Knox times 10. There'd be tanks, helicopters, automated turrets if they exist in this kind of movie. It'd be full on like lockdown. You're talking Fortress World level security. But what the interesting thing is, all this time stored is basically making artificial inflation happen, because there is enough time to make the economy work and give people a fairer shot, but they're hoarding the time, they're hoarding the wealth, like happens in their own world, but they're doing it to a ridiculous degree in time to basically make things more expensive, make less time available for the people at the bottom. But also, because they have these stores of time, when they need to release some time, let's say, all right, we need to release 10 million years worth of time into the population, to make things better because they're getting rowdy, they can do so. So they really do have the power to manipulate the economy to a ridiculous degree. They can literally withhold time as well, so people start dying if they need to get rid of some bodies, which is crazy, but in time gives them the power. This makes the people at the top more powerful than ever. Like, you think printing money is a power? Well, in time, you have the power not only to print money in a sense, but withhold it, and it results in people's direct death. You could literally withhold time for a few weeks from people, and you could wipe out millions. It is very scary when you look into it. And before we get to the end, something I kind of just realised. So when Will turns 25 in the movie, he mentions everyone, when you get to 25, your clock appears and you get a year. And obviously, to Sylvia, when she recounts herself turning 25, she wakes up with like decades on the clock, maybe even centuries. So obviously, that time doesn't just start automatically at a year. Will's already has time taken off, which means there is the ability to remotely remove and take time. So you don't directly need to go to people's forearm like they do in the movie. There is ability for someone or some way to remotely move time and give it. Now, can this just only be done once when they turn 25? Maybe. But if you have the ability to remotely take and give time, you're basically a god. You could wipe out the entire planet or make everyone immortal with a push of a button. This is never explained in the film. I think it's just a plot hole, but that is insane. Like, that power is basically like X-Men god tier level power. You can just take everyone's time or give it without even going near them. That truly is a god power. So in time never explains it, but if anyone knows the answer, that'd be good to know, because that's got my noodle working way too much. Anyway, that's In Time, bit of an interesting film. Is it the best film? No, but it's a good watch, quite fun. I like the style, I like the kind of themes it's doing. Obviously, it's kind of pushing for crony capitalism and why it's bad, but also, doesn't mean you're a socialist if you say that before anyone kicks off. It's kind of like there's a happy balance between all things, and too much of anything is a bad thing. That's kind of what I took from it. But yeah, give the movie a watch, tell me what you think. Hope you enjoyed the episode as always, and thanks for watching, guys. Have a beautiful evening.